All right, I'd like to also welcome everybody to today's session. I think it's going to be a very productive, very informative session. I'm excited, given the group of out-of-state panelists and in-state panelists that we've put together to talk about different ways in which we can try to provide some measure of congestion relief in what is Connecticut's most congested corridor. And I want to also personally thank each of the out-of-state panelists in particular for giving of their time 2 to 3 days, some of them coming on 6-hour flights yesterday, using the whole day for travel. It's not an easy thing. We appreciate your effort on that. Thank you. My goal today is really to explain some basics about what we're trying to achieve here. We actually have 2 different studies underway in Connecticut right now. One on I-95 corridor, and we have a very similar project underway in Hartford looking at the similar issues. Primary goal of both studies is to find ways to reduce congestion, to provide some measure of congestion relief. Both projects were funded through a special federal grant program called the Value Pricing Pilot Program, otherwise or formally known as the Congestion Pricing Pilot Program, which makes use of electronic tolling to apply differential rates of tolls at different times of day. But we're really looking at electronic tolling and congestion pricing as one of many possible components to a much broader strategy for the corridor of how we can reduce congestion in the corridor as a whole. The purpose of the forum in particular today is to learn what other parts of the country are doing, what's working for them in terms of congestion relief, and what types of congestion pricing methods they may have adopted. We're going to ask each of the out-of-state panelists to talk about what they've learned as they've implemented their projects, most of whom have been fairly successful projects in other states across the country. For those of us who are from Connecticut, this is really a great opportunity to learn what others have done and hear from them what lessons they've learned in terms of what they would do differently the next time around, what worked, what didn't work. And we can all ask collectively at the end of this session, what do they think would work here in Connecticut? Because things that have worked in other parts of the country may not be applicable here in Connecticut. So we're using this as an exploration session, if you will. The format for today's session is, as Arnie has said, about 3 hours. We're having another one of these tomorrow in Hartford. The agenda for both locations is very similar. We start with an overview of the problem and the study. We have the first panel of out-of-state professionals talking about their experiences. Then we open it up to a second panel of local panelists who bring their local perspectives and ask questions of the outside experts. And then at the very end, the last session, we're going to open this up to the general public or general audience for questions as well. So let me start with a probably 15-minute overview of what the congestion issue is in I-95 corridor and what we're doing as part of this study. This is a very long corridor. It's defined primarily by I-91, about 40 to 45 miles in length from the New York border all the way to New Haven. But it's not the only facility in this travel corridor. Other key facilities in terms of transportation modes in the corridor are the Merritt Parkway, and for the out-of-state panelists, the Merritt is a parkway where trucks are excluded. I think I-95 generally carries about 140 to 160,000 cars a day. If I'm not mistaken, the parkway is probably more like 90 to 100,000 cars a day. And probably what's as surprising as anything, if you're coming from out of state, is the importance of the rail system in this corridor. I can't overstate the importance of the rail corridor. That facility alone, just in Connecticut, carries about 80,000 riders a day, comparable to the traffic that we're seeing on the Merritt Parkway. So all 3 facilities are key, but we're also going to take a look at the other roadways in the area and on I-84 as well, because we know if tolls are instituted in one location, that it may affect traffic in other locations as well. So But that will be the three primary facilities that we're focusing on. Congestion in this corridor is extremely severe, and unfortunately, this is also the state's most important economic corridor. It's important not just to the region or to the corridor itself, but it affects all of Connecticut. Much of the business of Connecticut comes through the I-95 corridor. So we all have a stake in how well this corridor performs. And unfortunately, it is also our most congested corridor. It is, on a typical day, possible to see traffic jams that are 20 miles in length that last for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And we have some slides coming up very shortly that illustrate that very well graphically. The problem only continues to get worse. We could ignore it, not do anything, but given in the last decade that we've seen a 19% worsening of congestion, we know that trend will simply continue. We feel it's time now to take another serious look at what we can do. It's costly to the residents and businesses. By one estimate, there is lost time equal to about 40 million hours a year for drivers in the corridor, costing those drivers and businesses associated with the trucks and stuff about $860 million a year. So there's a huge cost to this congestion that most people probably aren't always aware of. This is a graphic illustration of the congestion in the corridor, and I'll tell you, being a Hartford area resident, when I took a look at this and actually drove the corridor for the first couple times, I was astounded. I thought traffic congestion was bad in the Hartford area. It pales by comparison to I-95. So this is an interesting graphic, and I'm going to try to explain to you what it actually says. First of all, it's a time-space diagram, if you will. On the left-hand axis there, you'll see the time of day, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning at the top, progressing down through the morning to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, all the way to noontime. And along the bottom axis, going from left to right, you have a representation, simple straight line representation of the I-95 facility itself, stretching from Greenwich all the way to New Haven, about 45 miles in length. And the thing about this diagram is to look at the color key. Here, if you see the green color, that means it's at pretty free flow. Its travel speeds about 60 miles an hour or higher. But as that shades to yellow and then orange and to red, the speeds are dropping off. So you see a lot of orange and red on this diagram as well as yellow. And if making use of what's already printed on that screen and the arrows, you can see the congestion starts in Bridgeport at about 6:30 in the morning. As the morning progresses, that gradually expands southward or westward to Stamford. At its worst, it is 20 miles in length. And I was up at the city of Stamford just a couple of weeks ago. I experienced at least 15 miles of that personally. Extra half hour to get to a meeting, barely made it on time. So we have extensive congestion in the corridor in terms of its length, but also its duration. Again, it starts, as this illustrates, at 6:30 in the morning, and it'll last until at least 10:30 in the morning. That's 4 hours of peak period. That's simply amazing. Most cities like Hartford, for example, are 2 hours, 2.5 hours. This is really exceptional by almost any standards. It basically means, especially when you consider the afternoon, there's very little uncongested time in the corridor. It begins to affect business meetings, medical appointments. It affects a lot of the way people live and businesses do their business. And this is a typical day. This is not an exceptional day. This is your average Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday over a period of many months. So on some days, it's actually a lot worse than that. So bear that in mind. This is looking at the afternoon in the opposite direction. In this case, we're northbound in the afternoon, heading from Stamford area towards New Haven. And you can see the conditions, if anything, are probably worse. The extent of congestion is probably well more than 20 miles at this point, and the duration is similar, at least 4 hours in duration. So it is a serious problem. We need to do A lot of things here, not just pricing, not just highway improvements, not just transit improvements, but probably a combination of things to try to put a real dent in congestion in this area. And that's what we're going to be doing as part of this study. We will be looking at electronic tolling, in particular congestion pricing, as a way of managing demand, but we're going to be looking at the same time at possible highway improvements and transit improvements, in particular rail and bus improvements. We fully expect that no single silver bullet exists, that we're going to have to use a combination of different methods, and the key will be finding the right combination that works for us here in this corridor. I want to stress something else. Because this is a study that uses a highway name in its label, the I-95 Congestion Relief Study, there is a fear among some people that this is just a highway study, and it means DOT is shifting its focus to highways. DOT continues to support as central or core to its transportation strategy in this corridor the rail and bus system. We've committed $3 billion over the last decade into the New Haven line. We've got programmed another $1 billion just in the next 5 years. We are not backing away from our commitment to transit. It is a critical aspect of the economy of this area. It's a critical part of our transportation strategy for the corridor. Just a quick overview of some of the things we're going to be doing within the study, and this is the boring part, so I'll try to be quick. We will be having public engagement with events like this and smaller meetings and some larger public meetings all through the process, although we're sort of really kicking off the big public involvement phase at this stage today. We've got technical studies that are underway right now in terms of collecting data, including the type of travel time data that we just showed you. That's already been underway, and we have a lot of that completed. We're developing special models to make sure that when we do identify alternatives, relief methods, that we can test those appropriately and have a certain amount of comfort or assurance that they will work as we think they will work, and we'll get the amount of congestion relief that we hope to get out of them. And then finally, we will be doing the more important things, that is identifying alternatives. Even input that we get today from the panelists, both in-state and out of state, will help inform what those initial alternatives might be. And then we'll go through a very lengthy process of testing and evaluating those alternatives as well. In particular, because we are in Connecticut and there's such a long history of an unfavorable history of tolls in Connecticut, I thought it'd be worthwhile to explain a little bit about the new process for toll collection in the United States, and in particular, congestion pricing, which is really the more important aspect of this sort of pairing of two different systems. The system that most people in Connecticut are probably familiar with go back to their memories from 30 years ago when Connecticut did away with the last of its tolls. There used to be barrier tolls on I-95 every 4 or 5 miles, and they themselves were the cause of much of the congestion on I-95. They also created serious accident problems, which eventually is what led, after a couple of really bad accidents, to the removal of the tolls from Connecticut. And they created air quality problems as well. Now, our goal in this particular project is to relieve congestion, so using anything that approaches this old system of toll collection is what we don't want to do. We do know that the industry and technology has changed dramatically in the last 30 years, and we think through new electronic methods, we can do toll collection and congestion pricing in a much less intrusive manner, in a very safe manner, one that does not in itself create congestion, but perhaps helps relieve some congestion. Newer systems rely on electronic sensors mounted overhead over each travel lane on gantries that span the entire highway. They're capable of reading electronic toll tags like Easy Passes readers, tags, but they can read them at any traffic speed. It doesn't matter. You don't have to slow down to 10 to 15 miles per hour. You can travel under that gantry at 60, 70 miles per hour, and it's still going to be able to read the Easy Pass. As a result, there are no toll booths, therefore no stopping, No need to even slow down, as the photograph on the bottom there shows, normal traffic speeds going under those toll reader gantries, if you will. As a result, the new systems are safe and do not create traffic delays in and of themselves. The more important piece, though, electronic tolling is just a way to collect the toll. The piece that we're interested in here is the congestion pricing piece. And congestion pricing is really a method of trying to manage demand or use of the facility during peak traffic periods. And I want to emphasize, it's only during the peak traffic period that we're sort of applying this special pricing. Congestion pricing makes use of higher toll rates or prices during the peak traffic periods on the highway, with lower rates charged in the off-peak period. The incentive here is to get drivers to change, to shift to less congested times of day, to less congested routes, to shift to other modes such as transit, or increasingly, and this is a topic we'll spend a little time on today, to shift to other lanes on the same highway. This is a concept that's becoming known as managed lanes. It's a form of congestion pricing. You can think of it as being able to pay to use an express toll lane, similar to the way the HOV lanes in Hartford are used by people who are in carpools, but in this case, you pay a toll to use the facility. The advantage is you're guaranteed you'll get a good travel time in that express toll lane, and you're not going to have to be stuck in the general traffic on the rest of the highway. An aspect of congestion pricing, I think that's important. It's one of those methods of congestion relief that is sustainable. That is, as traffic demand grows, as population and jobs grow in the corridor, and you start getting more and more people want to use the facility during the peak hour, you have to make sure that you don't overwhelm the capacity of that express toll lane. As a result, you start adjusting the price higher to make sure that you keep that a free-flowing lane. So the idea of congestion pricing being a method of sustainable congestion relief is important to keep in mind as we talk about it today. This is what the express toll lanes might look like. You have general purpose lanes that people can travel in. They don't have to pay a toll, but if they're running late for an appointment, if they're running late for work, if they have to pick their kid up at daycare by 5:30 and it's already 5:15, rather than getting stuck in 20 minutes of delay in the general purpose lanes, they can pay to use the express toll lane to get past all of that and arrive on time. They're gaining in popularity across the United States in large part because they give their drivers a choice. Pay or don't pay. On those days you really want it, you're going to be willing to pay. And that is true regardless of income level. And whether you're high income or low income, everyone seems to favor having this choice available to them. More than that, this has been proven in a lot of parts of the country now to be a very effective tool of providing congestion relief. Enough so that that cities and states across the country have already adopted that, and more on the way. This map just illustrates how many of these systems are in place or going into place in the very near future. And again, it's that aspect of having a choice that are making these attractive. You'll hear today about the experience in Miami, also on I-95. We think there were a lot of similarities between I-95 and Miami and what we have here, and you'll hear from two of the out-of-state panelists today about that experience. This has been one of the most successful and effective express lane projects in the entire country. And it's interesting for us here for two reasons. One, they achieved an amazing amount of actual reduction in congestion. But secondly, through some very creative engineering, they were able to add an extra lane that they then served as an express toll lane with very little need to take any additional right-of-way. It largely fit within the existing footprint of the existing I-95 facility. They did that by stealing some width from shoulders and lanes in order to fit it in better. But you'll hear more about that from those two speakers. The other thing I want to come back to, the last couple slides here, is transit. This is a critical part of what we are considering a multimodal study. We're looking at what kind of highway improvements we can do, but we're also looking at what might be needed to improve the transit system in the area. We know it's critical today. What can we do to build on that role and enhance its function? We'll make sure we take a look at what tolls might do in terms of increasing ridership on the rail line, and therefore what we might need to do in terms of addressing traffic problem, or even the growing number of intrastate trips. And by that I mean trips from New Haven to Bridgeport, or Bridgeport to Stamford, for example, staying entirely within Connecticut. That's a part of the growing market for Metro North service today. Also look at the bus service, and we'll look at new opportunities for bus service in the area that are presented, I think, by the concept of express toll lanes. And a lot of the parts of the country where they've implemented express toll lanes, they've also added express bus lanes, or express bus service, I should say. All right? Right now, express bus service doesn't exist in the I-95 corridor, can't exist in the I-95 corridor, because there's nothing express about it. But if you have an express toll lane, you provide the opportunity for that bus to travel at 50, 60 miles an hour, the same as those people who are willing to pay the toll to use that express toll facility. We think it has a lot of other advantages. We think it could serve that intrastate market very well, probably solve some of the parking problems that we're seeing around existing rail stations, but it is an exciting opportunity that we'll examine as part of the study. My concluding remarks then, I just want to emphasize, this is a multimodal study. We're looking at a variety of different congestion relief options, highway, transit, and pricing. And we think of those three, pricing is one that has the added advantage of providing sustainable relief into the future. As part of the study, we'll be trying to do an assessment whether pricing as part of a larger package can help manage congestion on I-95. No determinations have been made yet. It will be interesting to see what the results of this are and whether it is a viable option. We expect the results to be done and a report to be prepared and presented to the governor and the legislature early in 2015. And with that, I'll turn it back to Arnie, and somehow I've got to close